Hello, it's March 16th, 2017. I'm Tony Smario coming to you from my father, BroSal.org YouTube channel. I'd like to do another edition of World War III this week, perhaps a little off the beaten track. I don't want to analyze all the nonsense news articles. I feel that anyone who's been listening to me for any length of time, the core group that does, certainly doesn't see the news the way the masses do. There's a relevant reaction to facts on the ground as they're discovered by our journalists and reported through our, left, right, liberal or conservative press angles, so that even the people that believe they're undermining that by trying to find an agenda in the news articles rarely see the same agenda that we talk about here. It's usually something that's, I believe, has been manipulated already into the field of view for the masses, whether it's following Anonymous or Alex Jones or the people that have got people in the streets right now, rally cries, either for Trump or against Trump. But as we've been saying for the last year with all this nonsense, we could tell that the election was pointing toward chaos and division. That's the one thing that was for sure. Didn't matter whether Hillary or Trump was elected when you get down to the dirt that everyone's got on both of them. The absurd nature of a great and free country, the richest country in the world, that's really in the last couple of generations since World War II, has had sort of an uncontested trajectory at engaging every sort of manner of maintaining that momentum of keeping the rule, keeping the great democracy for the world. We were going to, if you look back how long ago it was, hard to, imagine that with all the power and all the intention to spread democracy and bring up the little guy, bring up the poor countries and all this kind of thing, what's resulted in a world where we're, again, on the brink of war. So if you don't have a foundation that undermines all of the propaganda and see everything that's reported as a well-orchestrated piece of propaganda, not a reaction to we found out Syria's bombing its citizens. What do we do? Well, the Pentagon says we've got to act because we're a moral country and we've got to take action. If you get into that narrative and you don't undermine it with a story that's certainly more actual and relevant and responsible for all that propaganda, I think it's just the future there is to be stressed and confused and eventually prodded in one way or another into whoever you're supposed to war for. It'll be quite easily defined who you need to war against. And that's why today I want to talk about this underlying plan, which I'm always alluding to, but I want to give it a little more definition today for the people that listen to me regularly. Those of you that are new, there's a lot of study there if you care to catch up with us. And for the benefit of those that are listening all the time, I don't want to have to reiterate everything. And so you can do your own independent study. People like James Corbett are terrific, though, as I say, I believe he misses entirely, never talks about the eschatological picture as if that's just a myth and a fantasy, never talks about the third temple in Jerusalem as if that's an unimportant part of this whole settlement of the Palestinian issue. What do you think they're holding out for? What do you think they push all those settlement building and all that kind of thing? What does Israel really want that they have to sell the world on? So anyway, I'm sort of writing about that, and we've been talking about it's the basis of my father's ministry for 20 years in the public light anyway, is calling on the fact that it's the wars and rumors to wars that lead to peace. Everybody's going to scream peace as hard as they're screaming war. That's my, you'll know whether our channel or whether I'm on target if that happens. If we go to World War III, stop listening to me, because I obviously am not seeing it right. But I think the real plan, not the reaction, the plan is wars that can be built up like the Cold War was for an agenda. The agenda is a great peace plan that, when broken, leads to the war we expect is World War III or Armageddon from the eschatological standpoint. So that's my thesis that I believe all of our news falls into. And I want to point out a little more specifically today, I noticed that people seem to be interested in Iran and Russia and China, this unholy alliance, as I called it. Though let's go ahead and get the record straight that title was meant to be tongue-in-cheek, as I think most of the people who listen to me regularly understand. I don't imagine for a second that that's the group that's unholy and that it's NATO and the Americans and their Zionist fight that's the holy one. Of course, that's the whole point of my insight, is to point out that the Zionism is all a setup and a fake. But I want to go even deeper than that to point out that even the Zionism fake is too obvious, and that's being used ultimately. And I say it's being used, to target Iran. That, Iran's the eventual prize for the people who are going to run the world after the Great War. And they're using this Sunni-Shia conflict that they're stimulating and have been for many years. I'll get into it here in a second. But I say that we're on a war, peace, war plan, with these wars being but the teaser, the setup. They're giving you the reasons, who the enemies are, who's going to go with who might go with who. Philippines, we don't know, right? Japan, we're being told they're making deals with Russia. Who will they fall in with in the last resort? But they're afraid of going to China, so they got to stick with American guns to keep China off them. So the first time since World War II, they're being allowed to be pro-military and build that military for this defensive stance that's aimed at primarily China, but also Russia. In the case of a China-Russia alignment, one of Japan's ancient enemies. Ancient in the sense of just the last couple of 200-300 years. So I want to point out that with regard to Iran being targeted as an ultimate prize, it's not the prize today. That's why I keep, I feel my most relevant insight that it's bringing me to is that there's going to be peace before war. So all this war chant shouldn't have everybody, that's what's setting everybody up, I think, is the war cry, the war drums, and the wars themselves, wars and rumors of wars. So it's not just that it's all fake. They're killing people. And we know this first stage, I say, of the wars are this Sunni-Shia wars. And so I want to put in perspective in a minute why that's the first stage of this march toward peace that results in Armageddon. Right now, I want to undermine, let's say, the propaganda to get a proper look at what Iran represents to the people that are drawing us toward this war. We're shown for years now, but in the moment, absolutely, as the propaganda is building to what we want people to think of Iran today, they're still the number one terrorist state. Okay, they're responsible for the funding of the terrorist groups like Hezbollah, the most functional, let's say, of the terrorist groups of the Shia Islam world. Right, we blame Saudi Arabia and Qatar and these Sunni Arab states for funding radical Sunni Islam, so that we have it covered on all sides. But with regard to Iran, they're still regarded, not Saudi Arabia, as the number one terrorist state. I mean, Saudi Arabia is not responsible for Al-Qaeda and ISIS, who seems to have accomplished so much more in a very short time than Hezbollah or Hamas. They're like the PLO. They just get to lob some rockets and keep their people being slaughtered over their constant guerrilla resistance that never amounts to anything like a movement where all the Arabs gather behind them, or that they get to declare a state or do any of these things. But ISIS, they do. But no, it's still Iran. It's the number one terrorist state, and it's Hezbollah and Hamas because they're the ones that threaten Israel. See, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, they just threaten the Western interests, supposedly. Right? They just threaten the Shias and the West. They don't threaten Israel, funny enough. Nobody can draw 2 and 2 there and say that, oh, maybe Israel's behind that, deceitful terrorism that goes with their own premise of a secret service through deception. We'll do our war. So anyway, let's get back on Iran, number 1 terrorist state responsible for these horrible anti-Zionist forces that continue to be maintained, that can be blamed on upsetting any peace process. Of course, as a political objective, they refuse to acknowledge Israel, the state of Israel, which, is based in fact, because through scripture, through the religious angle that Iran's been given to follow, Israel is illegitimate. So why would they? It would be against their moral responsibility in their religion to accept Israel as God's people that God reestablished in this state. That can't be true to anyone who knows the facts from a religious background like Iran is presented as. So they refuse to acknowledge Israel. So that's a real stick in the mud, aren't they? No matter what peace we make, they're not going to be able to go along with it. It's a very important part of this setup that's been going on since our hands in the 50s have been in Iran. That's what's starting to occur to me now. Why they've been such an important part, why they were the first part, the first place we went after World War II to get our hands dirty after the establishment of Israel was we got to control the Shia population, not to destroy them. No. To reserve them for the day that they can be the great enemy that brings about the ultimate destruction of the final enemies of the ones that want to rule the world from their new temple in Jerusalem, which I'm starting to see could be in their mind the one that they plan to have if they can't defend, this one that's going to be built, this third temple is the one to satisfy Zionism so they can start slaughtering animals again. But the one the Masons want to build, if there's such a thing as a Luciferian Solomon's Temple, obviously they're not going to worship Jehovah in that and slaughter animals. And so you get this cryptic message through Daniel that in the middle of a 7-year deal, somebody's going to stop the sacrifice on the temple in what we expect to be this third temple, where they're now going to have the altar set up like they're planning, and they're going to be slaughtering the bulls. And it's that stopping of that temple worship that's going to bring on this big problem, because this person that stops it apparently is going to be working miracles, according to Revelation, and demand that, we all build an image that everybody, that this false prophet, it says, is going to make speak. And through the miracles, and it says, going to make the world worship this image. We're all going to, say, wow, who can make war with this entity and this power? Look what's being displayed here. So, that's the sort of eschatological side of all this that's coming down. And it can only be imagined that when that happens, if that were to happen, let's just say, for instance, theoretically, that that you can produce the illusions of miracles, and behind Zionism is this plan to use this scripture as a reason to go take over the land, set up a state, and rule the world forever. Problem is, all these Arabs aren't going to stand for it, and even the Persians in the end aren't going to stand for it. But this whole Greater Israel project that you've started that you've said 100 years ago, here's what we want: Tigris to the Euphrates River, right? Egypt to the cedars of Lebanon or whatever. This is all to be this Greater Israel. So what happens now if you make a deal with your Sunni neighbors, the Arabs that are around you, and the Palestinians? We're going to share Jerusalem. We're going to be best friends now. Let's give Palestine their autonomy. Let's stop building these terrible, terrible settlements. Oh, yeah, the world's been right all along. Let's be nice to the Palestinians. Let's share Jerusalem as an international city of faith. And let's build our third temple again. Everybody loves each other. Everybody's happy. And then, lo and behold, amidst all these loving peace, the Messiah returns. Oh, hey, not our fault. Us Zionists, we didn't know. I guess we must be right. We came back to the land. God must have brought us back with all those weapons of the West. All that oppression, all that terrorism, all that deceit. I guess we were right. Because lo and behold, we made peace, built the temple, and now our Messiah has returned. Oh, what's that, Messiah? It's time for the Greater Israel Project? You heard him, guys. Get out of the way. Right? You heard him, Sunni Arabs. I know we just made a peace deal 3.5 years ago over all this. And I know NATO just set you up, Hashemite King, to rule over all these Sunnis in what is now, well, the land of Israel. So we'll let you live here under you have to take this mark if you want to buy and sell. So, I mean, that's the way I really see it going down. That's how you break this peace. You set up this peace with all these Sunni Arabs. Now they love you, right? Everybody worships in Jerusalem. Palestinian issues solved. Sunni Arabs are under a good caliph that leads the world in moderation or leads Islam, in moderation and demonstrating the positive elements of Islam. Oh, but along comes the Messiah. Oh, well, who could that be? Is it Jesus? Oh, no, sorry, guys. Again, Zionism was right. So, yeah, Christianity, you were wrong. Islam, you were wrong. So, naturally, get out of the way. Our Messiah's here. Look, he's working miracles. Look, he wants everybody to be friends, but we're going to worship this way now. And we're going to worship this image, and we're going to take this mark, and all of this land here, this is now Israel. So would you think that might bring on a world war? And the funny part is, you got to wonder, where do the American Christians come down on that one? Remember, this person looks like a lamb, according to Revelation. Doesn't look like the devil, like Christians think. This looks like the representative of Jesus, but obviously it's not Jesus. Obviously it's making some excuse for why this Messiah is not Jesus, but how Jesus was a great prophet or something. Because it fools everybody but the ones written in the Lamb's Book of Life were to believe. Only a very elect few will see through it and go, that's not quite right, is it? You know? I mean, I see that as at least the potential to both fulfill Scripture and make sense of the geopolitical scheme that has us doing such things as setting Iran up by, turning them into this enemy that they're not. So let's go back now to looking at this Iran situation. Who are they in this plan that I've got mapped out in my view as the strategy? They're nothing less than the final one to come in against this as the slaughter starts to take place between this Greater Israel Project. What can they do but get involved in the fight? Who else will have an interest in this fight except the Orthodox Christians? Who are they? The people in America and Canada and Europe? England? No, that's not Orthodox Christianity. They're the ones that have been supporting this Zionism all along. Orthodox Christianity is up in Russia, Greece, all these people that are catching hell and either catching hell financially right now or being turned into enemies like Russia. Those are the Orthodox Christians. Why do you think they're being turned into such a villain right now by the great Christian America? Do you ever hear a journalist point out that Russia is in fact a Christian nation? That they in fact are, they don't make things in Jesus' name illegal like they do in America. How come that's not brought out in this whole argument about whether it should be made illegal? That we'll look at Russia. I mean, they're also Christian. They claim to be Christian. It's where the first people that followed Christ and followed Paul and followed the early church, it's where they went in the persecution that came. They went to Russia. So the ancestry of the original Christianity is Russia, not Rome, not the Roman Catholic Church and all of this America and Britain. So, you got to get your history straight on that. That doesn't mean nothing in a person's heart. It's between you and God, what you believe and who you follow over that belief. But when you look at it geopolitically, it's interesting that it's Christian America villainizing, much more authentically Christian Russia and never pointing out that these are Christians. So, you have to imagine how all that plays into it. I'm bringing it into the Iran discussion because at the point when this Messiah, if it were to show up in history after a peace deal that allowed him to rebuild a third temple, and the Messiah said, yeah, now it's all Israel. The Messiah is here. It's time to take back the land God promised. Who's going to come against that except the Orthodox Christians that say, but you're not Jesus, and the Shia Muslims that say you're not going to destroy all of Islam over this. So that's what sets Iran and Russia to come in the end. And they'll probably be joined by Turkey, because by that point, Turkey will have been screwed as the pick for the leader of the Sunni Islam. So he would have already made him start, as these years were going by during this peace. That's why we're villainizing Turkey now, I think, if I had to bet. I still don't know. There's still a wild card. But if I had to bet, I'd say we're villainizing Turkey because ultimately we're going to drive Turkey to the other side. Because if we were to make the Hashemite king the one we supported to take over all these destabilized regions of Sunni Arabs, that coincidentally has been the result of our phony war on terrorism and the 9/11 attack that was a false flag. The result of it has been, in the real world, the complete destabilization of the Sunni Islam world, along with then funding the war against the Shias to push back that border in the different places, whether it's Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, all these places where it's all these Shia Arabs being killed and bombed. And so that's what's been going on for, that you can see it must be a plan. And it's where we've been putting the money and the effort for 2 decades now in the sense of military, at least, the 15 years officially since 9/11 and the aftermath of that. But even before that, what we've been doing in Africa and just the support, the military support of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and all the proxy stuff, the war with Iran, up until then through Iraq. So we've been, setting the groundwork for the Sunni Shia division to make sure there's no way these people can, they're busy fighting each other, hating each other. And so that makes the Shias that much more resolved in the face of the fact that these Saudi Arabia, all these Sunnis are accepting the money of the NATO West to do their bidding. What are the Shia Arabs supposed to do but defend themselves? So that's really what's been going on. But of course, it's under the cover of this propaganda that we get number one terrorist state responsible for the guerrilla war against Israel, who they refuse ever. It's in their, it's part of their constitution not to accept Israel as a state, which puts them at, unresolvable odds with the whole force of the West. And if the Messiah comes, and all these Western Christians believe that, well, this is the Messiah, because they're obviously going to explain how it suits Christianity also. Jesus was the Jesus to get the Christians, but this is the Messiah that was promised to the Jews because they came back to the land and built the temple for God. I mean, I see most of Western Christianity that's been supporting these people swallowing that hook, line, and sinker. So you've still basically got the U.S. and is the force with, this Israel that's now declared a different Messiah other than Jesus. And so it takes the real Orthodox Christians and the Shia Arabs and their coalition, which by necessity has to include China, because China's got to come down on that side of the coin. That's where they get their gas. That's where they get all their support. They're neighbors with Russia. So they're going to come down on the side of the Russia-Iran deal, just because geographically and geopolitically they've got no other choice once the war gets to that stage. And now you've got your Armageddon, see? And I say Turkey's going to have to throw in over there as well. So that's all being set up by making Iran sort of the pivot point, by being the grand prize that's the big holdout. They're the big bad guy. They won't recognize Israel. They won't stop supporting terrorism. They have nuclear ambitions to build a weapon, so they can be like North Korea and threaten the world, right? They won't stop antagonizing and provoking the U.S. Navy, threatening the shipping of the oil, which if they could disrupt that would just make everybody's bad economy even worse. So again, red flag for false flag. All we got to do is blow up a ship full of oil in that Gulf, and we got natural catastrophe. We've got oil crisis. We got all sorts of things suddenly blamed on Iran that become a reason to go to war with them. And I want to point out for the people that still might be in doubt that the media and the so-called journalism is anything but a script and a narrative being read by the different talking heads hired to appeal to the particular crowd they're selling their garbage to. I saw on a James Corbett clip from 4 years ago about the possible false flag of an EMP strike, electromagnetic pulse. Remember, Cheney told us famously, all they have to do is go up a couple of miles, set off a nuclear weapon, sets us back 100 years, right? So that's been their narrative now. When you watch how that wasn't just Cheney saying that, the little, at the time, they made a narrative of it. The science backed it up on all these different channels, all the wonderful graphics. It was high production Hollywood stuff. It wasn't a few alternative media people claiming something Cheney said offhand. They made a narrative out of it. And Corbett, of course, in his fantastic style, does a great job of bringing to life, bringing you all those clips. And what just almost knocked me off the chair is North Korea 4 years ago was being babbled in this same way as we're threatened with the nuclear weapons and constant war with North Korea, hostility. 4 years ago, it was that they were maybe one of the people with Iran setting up for a possible EMP strike. And it was, when you watched all the clips that Corbett showed, wasn't China going to do it? Wasn't Russia going to do it 4 years ago? Oh no. North Korea and Iran were the two countries that would have been the top suspects that seemed to be practicing drills. Because one of them, I don't know if it was Iran or North Korea, shot a missile straight up into the air with almost zero trajectory, just like you would do if you're going to set off an EMP strike. So all this hype 4 years ago. Do you ever hear the modern journalists bring up in the North Korea hype today that they're also suspected of an EMP strike? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't get enough of it. I follow every little... I watch all the stuff the Mr. Doom brings up in his revelation of the clips. I get my Yahoo stories. North Korea is constantly in the, headline is threatening to launch a nuclear strike, testing a nuclear weapon, testing a missile. They show us the footage of the missile test. Do they ever bring up that they've long been suspected of planning an EMP strike? How does that just drop off the radar? Did we find out they're not? Oh, no. Now they're going to send off nuclear weapons. Because back then they were telling us as part of the hype that because it only takes one bomb. Hey, that was the big threat, guy. Yeah, why should we worry about North Korea? Well, because they don't have to launch a nuclear strike against the U.S., which is unlikely that they would get many, hits in that could do much but bring retaliation. But if they could launch an EMP strike, over America that was successful, they could make the sort of strike that's worthwhile, knock out our, from what all the experts come on and then tell us, sends us back to before electronics. Everything, all of our electronics blow up. Nothing works anymore. We're back to the dark ages with regard to communication. And so all of a sudden, our army doesn't function. And so they were threatening us with the possibility that North Korea or Iran were both in a position to do that and had a, motivation to do that. Were possibly even testing their ability to do it. Do you hear that as part of the discussion today? Even though I haven't heard any other threat that seems as reasonable as some country, being able to get a bomb into that space needed, because it needs to be over the United States. So you'd have to be able to get a bomb to that location several miles over the United States. They never talk about the total impossibility of either of these countries with their technology that they've gotten strictly from the West. All their technology, I don't care if you say Iranian made, Russian made, North Korean made. Yeah, it's made with all the plans that they bought from, GE and, all the companies that DuPonts and the people, the American and international companies that develop, Ford Motors, Lockheed Martin, all these companies. These are the ones who get the big contracts to sell the technology, right? And so that's what Anthony Sutton brought out. And if you haven't heard the couple of things that are on the internet from that man, I really recommend that everyone go listen. There's 100 different pictures with titles, but there's only a couple of hours of anything he ever said out there that I can find on YouTube anyway. And it is well worth listening to. It really confirms what I've been saying. Russia couldn't have been what they are if somebody didn't build them up that are the same people that are building our weapons. And that happens to be true. And Professor Anthony Sutton was saying it, 40 years ago, pointing it out as it was happening, was pointing out that the transfer of finance and technology is what was enabling Russia and anybody to be a threat. China, all these countries at the time that were being touted as possible threats to American future dominance. Anthony Sutton was one of those few voices saying, well, yeah, but we're obviously partners with that threat because we're the one, we're funding their advance of technology so they can keep up, so they can be a threat, was his whole point. It wasn't for us. They couldn't be a threat. So I've been saying that I didn't know. I just found Anthony Sutton. I think I've heard his name referred to in my research, but I never had heard this couple of hours of his information. And it's fascinating and confirming. And as I say, it backs up what I've always asked is, how can you accept that Russia just simply has this military parity if it's not on purpose? He shows you, in fact, it's not only on purpose. Here's how it's happening, where it's happening. Here's who's doing it, right? That's what he was writing about in the 70s. So I encourage everyone to look up Anthony Sutton and learn, what your world's really like and then infer what kind of plan could come from that. And that's where I'm hoping our insight, is of value to you, because here's what I see coming of it. The wars they're building up to are so they can create this peace. And they need this peace because only through peace that it allows the rebuilding of the temple and this hailed peace that the temple brings, right? That this Zionist movement, see, it's a good thing. It made peace. It made peace with the Palestinians. All of their Sunni Arabs love them, right? I mean, Jordan has been their partner for years. Egypt made peace with them after the first war. Saudi Arabia, everybody's going to come to, all the Sunni Arabs are going to come to love this new peace process because it's going to be sensationalized, I think, just like the war process is now. And it's through that a Messiah could be offered in this new temple. And if that Messiah was accepted, because this Messiah is doing miracles, and so the Americans are saying, look, oh my God, it really is the Messiah. We have to do whatever that Messiah says, right? Donald Trump, the good Christian president, will make sure to say, obviously, this is what Jesus wanted us to do. And what we do is that God said that's the land of Israel, and of course we're going to rule it properly, but we're going to rule it. And of course that brings on the great war that can't be avoided now, and it brings in the real Christians. And it divides, if you notice, all, let's call it Orthodox religious peoples, or at least the monotheistic religious peoples. The Muslims now, who are waiting for Jesus, the Messiah, to return. How many of the Saudi Arabian, Jordanian Muslims, the ones working for ISIS, are going to be sold? No, but that's okay. This is the Messiah. Look at the miracles. Are they somehow more resilient to the brainwashing than American, dupes? I doubt it. Or State of Israel Jewish dupes all over the world, Zionist supporters that identify with Judaism. Aren't they also going to be confronted with that when, according to the Bible, 2 witnesses, 144,000 are marked from each of the tribes, 12,000 from each of the tribes, for a total of 144,000? That's not much in a big world, but it says to me there's going to be a contingency arguing that, wait a minute, that's not the real Messiah. Let's look at the facts. Let's look at the scripture. Let's get this straight. Wouldn't this then be the Dajjal if you're a Muslim? Wouldn't this then be the Antichrist if you're a Christian? Wouldn't this then be the false Messiah if you're a Jew? And everyone then in those religions has to face that contention, and it creates this sort of layer of division and conflict, almost civil war in some cases, within the very structures that are then fighting for and against on a national scale. As I say, the State of Israel, and I say NATO, America, backing them to go take over this land now, because obviously these miracles are real. Obviously this is the Messiah they've been waiting for. Who can make war with him? It says in Revelation, right? Who can stand against this? But we know at some point the temple is destroyed. It is stood against. And I say it's in response to that. See, that they come and they wipe out all of them. There's that saying in the Quran that a tree and a rock will say, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill him. So, see, that doesn't make much sense in the modern world if you look at it unsympathetically to any context. But if you imagine that if you imagine that what's revealed is all of this has been wars set up to divide Islam, to divide those Muslims, to be terrorizing the entire world in the name of peace, to bring about a false peace, to bring about a false Messiah working miracles that, I don't know, are they going to be supernatural or not? I'm going to say on the narrative, it's easier to stick to the fact that they can make fire rain down from heaven today. They can make their own miracles that will beguile the world, so they don't have to be real. So I'm just going to say they're going to look real. And because the force behind it has already got it planned, that it's going to be real through the media, that the people that stand against it will be unrelenting terrorists that have to be stopped. But that force, see, is going to eventually overcome Jerusalem. But it shows you why there would be such a hatred and such a palpable resistance at some point to come against this. And again, I say it'll be the actual Orthodox Christians that are being slaughtered over there next to, because there's tons of Orthodox Christians living throughout Syria. They've been the target of all of this. Iraq, Lebanon, all these territories where we, America, have been slaughtering people, are leading the slaughter. We, the Western Christianity, leading the slaughter of Orthodox Christians over there. That's why it's not in the news. That's why what you get in the news is Iran's the number one terrorist state. Iran funds Hezbollah and Hamas, who in 30 years have been unable to win a single battle, get a single peace of Gaza, they've been unable to do anything but bring constant oppression on their people. That's all that Iran, with all its great terrorism funding's been able to do. They didn't bring down the Twin Towers. No, Saudi Arabians did. Sunni Arabs, not Shia Arabs, right? They're not responsible for ISIS killing innocent people, driving over them with trucks. No, Sunni Arabs are responsible for that. Our friends of our friends, the Sunni Arabs in the region, are the ones paying for that and responsible for those on the surface level narrative. But Iran is the number one state-sponsored terrorist. They're the one that keeps threatening Israel with Hamas and Hezbollah. They won't acknowledge Israel. They want a nuclear weapon. They might blow up an EMP and get America. Nobody bothers to point out what would be the logistical way in which Iran, from Iran or any of its holdings, can get a nuclear weapon over the middle of the United States. Show me how that's going to happen with our missile defense systems. No, just that this is what they want to do. This is what they could do. And look what would happen if they could do that. No journalist says, but they can't. So it's shouldn't even be offered as a, newsworthy item, the hype and the scare about it. It can't happen. And of course, they want nothing more to send their little tiny PT boats up against our Navy, because that has such a promising future in their, not being destroyed like Iraq and everybody else. So, yeah, the reality with Iran is probably that since our hands have been in there since the 50s, since we know the Ayatollah was in France waiting to get on a French, NATO-sponsored plane to go fly over there and lead the CIA-sponsored revolution in Iran. And the modern Iranians seem to understand, as clear as we understand our Congress is bought by Wall Street, they understand their mullahs are bought by the money. I mean, it's not that hard to track that, is it? And just see it, in the way that your Congress responds to you and the needs of the people and the desires of the people, and how, instead they voted for the banks. Whoa, instead they voted for the pharmaceutical company. Whoa, instead they voted for, more military spending. When the people said, no, we don't want to get involved in Iraq. No, we don't want to go to Syria. No, we don't believe it's worth our, but yes, we did. So I say that, they needed control of the Shia population, true control, exercised from what's taken, as we can see now, 50 years to prepare for this moment, the way I look at the narrative. And that they were, therefore set up, perhaps with Turkey, to be the final enemy, because those are the two big, strong groups, left after the Sunnis that we've destroyed now. That center, of the region, the Levant, let's say. We've destroyed all that. Okay, we've destabilized that to set up for the next phase. Who's left that's strong now? Persia and Turkey, as far as a real group of people. So they're being saved, I think, and set up to be supported by the Orthodox Christian Russia to come in after the atrocity of a Messiah results in the fact that the Western Christians and Zionists, now's the time for the Greater Israel Project. Now, now our Messiah says, time for God to rule all that land. So I think that's why it's coming that way, and why the war, peace, war strategy looks the most plausible to me, especially if you incorporate into eschatological visions and prophecies. Jesus telling them wars and rumors of wars, but don't be alarmed at that. Why? Because they're going to make peace. They're going to scream peace for 3.5 years, according to eschatology. And so, in the end, what you have is devastation that I say is also planned by that deep, the deepest circle. If you want to get back, if you want to finish it off with a vision of who's behind Zionism. I still say it's this, if there's a Luciferian nature, whether it's a material group using God and the religious story, imagine a Rothschild that's a materialist and seizes onto the idea that if I call myself a Jew and follow this strategy laid out by Pike, I could rule the whole world from the richest area of the world, which is the Middle East and that Levant. So why wouldn't that be your plan if you're a materialist? If you're being driven by devils and demons and Lucifer himself because he wants to sit on a throne simply because God said he would in Jerusalem, well, that makes a lot more sense to a theist like myself who imagines a true dimension of some spiritual thing that's going on that's manifested into our reality as this left-right paradigm, this good-evil paradigm. And so if it's in that context, the good God declared to sit on the throne in Jerusalem and benevolently rule the world forever, then why wouldn't the bad God, show its superiority by being able to accomplish that declaration for himself, itself? So if you want to put it in that, temporal analogy of a God and a devil fighting it out for a prize, it still seems to, from that Luciferian angle, well, then you're still using the Zionists, obviously, because the temple doesn't get built and they support a Messiah who brings back the original service, at least not according to eschatology. Daniel says in the middle of the week, he stops the sacrifice and causes the abomination that brings desolation. So, that's why we're looking for peace to be the great deception that brings about the conditions for war, and why I can see that context of the words of Jesus, the Messiah, saying, when you see, the wars and rumors of wars, when you hear that cry, don't be alarmed yet. The end is not yet. And so I think that's the insight that has to grow out of our watch now of the events unfolding, and to keep trying to pull people away from being caught up in the moment to moment. Oh, North Korea, are they going to launch a missile? Russia, what should we do to avoid war with Russia? You watch. Just watch it unfold, because we're going to go to peace first. The war with Russia only happens after the Messiah comes, because there's no big reason for it until then. Until the Messiah comes and says, now we rule under God, because that's what the prophecy says. And so when the Messiah comes, now you got a problem. That's why it's funny, nobody brings that up. Everybody wants to build the temple, wah, rah, rah. What happens if the Messiah comes and it's not Jesus? What do all the Orthodox Christians and Muslims do about their faith? So anyway, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And please subscribe. And I'm hoping a Veterans Today article that was just submitted will be published. I don't know if you're a member of Veterans Today, or it would probably really help us. We got over 10,000 reads of the article that got published there last time. It resulted in about a 20% boost of our subscribers. So more people are getting, our insight. So if you want to help us, there's always the ways of, supporting us, either financially, tell a friend, share our stuff, or, go to, write Veterans Today and tell them, yeah, I like that guy, Tony Smario's stuff. I appreciate you, putting more of his stuff on the air. I think that could really help us, and any sort of locations like his that might actually print the things I say. You'll find almost anything popular, even in the alternative media, wouldn't touch the things I'm saying. But he's a very Kevin Barrett at the Veterans Today is who you want to write to. They have many editors, but Kevin Barrett, Veterans Today, they're a very anti-Zionist platform, pointing out the crimes and the illegitimacy of Zionism. So our story that we talk about here fits very well into that. Anyway, thanks for being here. Appreciate anything you can do to support us, and keep loving your neighbor. We'll be back with the Bible study real soon.